Subscribe before the truth disappears. They hit the dirt road with lights killed, brakes sighing into the dark. The Willamette pressed close on both sides, the trees knitted overhead so thick, the stars were a rumor. Detective Laura Hendricks stepped out first, boots sinking into loam, the smell of wet fur and diesel heavy in the air. Radios hissed. Someone whispered, "Trailhead's 100 yards north." Hikers flagged it. A ranger truck idled behind the county SUVs. Special Agent Daniel Rivas with the U.S. Forest Service snapped his headlamp to low and nodded toward a strip of orange tape fluttering from a branch. Camcorder was half buried right off the spur, he said. Group of 4 came in around dusk, 2 from Portland, 2 local. One of them says he recognized the face on the tape. Who? Ranger Noah Delaney. Hendricks had read Delaney's file enough to recite it in the shower. 10 years with the service, trail maintenance and visitor safety, dependable, quiet. Vanished in March, last known location 3 miles from here after reporting suspicious activity near mile 19. Months of grid searches turned up nothing except weathered footprints that went in circles, like the forest had folded him back into itself. The official line, exposure, misadventure, had never sat right with her. "Where's the camcorder now?" she asked. "In our custody." Rivas jerked his chin at the tailgate of his truck, where an evidence tech was photographing a mud-caked handheld like it was an old wound. "Show me where they found it first," Hendricks said. "Then we watch." They moved into the trees, lamps on low to keep the light from broadcasting. Ferns slick with dew brushed their shins. Somewhere deep, water worked over stones. The orange tape led them into a pocket of ground disturbed by fresh boot prints and careful hands. Scraped soil, a shallow depression like someone had pressed the camcorder in and patted it back with a gloved palm. Hendricks crouched, gloved fingers hovering. Pine duff clung to the sidewalls in a way that said, recent, not months. The smell of turned earth was clean, not sour. "This didn't sit here all spring," she said. Rivas was quiet a beat. "We'll date the needles, check moisture content." Hendricks straightened. "Let's watch the thing." Back at the truck, the tech had the camcorder connected to a field monitor, its casing wrapped in a plastic sleeve, battery swapped from a power bank. The screen ghosted to life, blue, then black, then grain. Canted, gray-green, a flashlight beam jittering across bark. The timestamp struggled and then stabilized, 2:11 a.m. Wind hissed, breathing, a voice, a man's, low and careful. "If anyone finds this, my name is Noah Delaney. I'm on the south side of mile 19, near the old service road with the washout. Something's wrong out here." The camera swung and caught a trunk. Carved into the bark, a symbol. A diamond split by a vertical line, 4 short ticks like cardinal points. The beam dragged on, found another, and another, spaced along the trail as if they were waypoints on a map no one wanted to share. Hendricks felt the tiny hairs right on her neck. Those weren't in the search notes. Rivas's jaw set. No mention. On screen, Delaney's breath stuttered. "I saw a light. It's moving. It's not a camp." There was a pause as he shifted the camera to himself for a second, a smear of cheekbone and stubble, eyes wide, rain bead on his brow. He whispered into the lens, "They're not hunters." The picture lurched, dark shapes shouldering past, branches snapped. The beam caught the white belly of a downed alder, then swung to a pale wedge of something through trees, a cold star of light bouncing, not steadily, but with intention. Hendricks leaned closer. The light moved as if slung low and held by a person who knew where they were going. "Get me audio up," she said. The tech thumbed a dial. Under wind and breath there it was. Engine noise, distant, muffled like a generator choked by a tarp. Then voices, not words but a pattern. 2, maybe 3, one older, one higher, The kind of quiet exchange people make when they've done this before. The beam tracked the ground, boot impressions over boot impressions. The angle changed. Delaney had set the camcorder down to draw something with his finger in the wet. The diamond symbol, then an arrow, then the number 19. He underlined it twice. A minute later, the image staggered as he picked up the device again and ran. The picture tore sideways, trees bladed past, and then froze on a sliver of corrugated metal half buried under salal, man-made. The light ahead blinked out. Everything stopped. Only breath and the small animal noise of fear. "Come on, Noah," Hendricks whispered, as if time would bend to her. The beam fell to his hand and the camera saw the journal he'd been writing in. Field notebook, the kind rangers kill by the dozen in rain. He flipped a page. Sketches of the same symbols, overlaid with notes. Generator at night, smell of fuel. Tree blazes like trail yet off trail. Movement between 2 and 3. In the margin, being followed. A twig popped near the mic, sharp, close. The camcorder jerked. The last seconds heated up into chaos. Delaney whipped the camera around and the lens caught motion behind him, a shape occluded by 2 trunks, a shoulder, the underside of a brim, and then the screen bruised black. A thud. The kind that isn't loud, but heavy. Silence. Then static like a blanket pulled over the whole forest. The tech paused the scrub bar on a single ghost frame, the kind that has more noise than image. He said, "That's the last full frame. After that, a corrupted block, and then nothing." "Back one," Hendricks said. They did. The shape behind Delaney smudged but distinct now. Someone close enough to be practically breathing into his collar. The brim was wrong for a baseball cap. It looked flat, stiff, like a campaign hat. The kind rangers wore. Rivas exhaled through his nose. Could be anyone with surplus. "Zoom the chest," Hendricks said. Grain swam, consolidated, and something like a patch came into the plane. A rectangle over the left breast. It was impossible to read, but there was a tear on the lower edge, notched like a half moon. Rivas went still. Hendricks watched him register. "What is it?" "There's only one jacket I know that has a tear like that," he said softly. "Paul Haynes had one. He snagged it on a fence last winter and said he'd replace it. He never did." "Haynes is senior ranger on the east side." He coordinated half the search for Noah. The radio on Hendricks' hip crackled with a whisper of dispatch, then cleared. She thumbed it off. The forest felt closer. "Where are our hikers?" she asked. "In their cars," Rivas said. "We took initial statements. One of them, Owen Pike, worked seasonal trails here 5 years back. He's the one who recognized Noah's face." Hendricks looked at the dirt under her boots, then at the camcorder again, at its battery door secured with gray tape peeled and reapplied. "We need the journal," she said, "and we need to go where this was shot." Rivas nodded for a deputy to bag the equipment. "Service road is washed out to the north. We'll hoof it in." They moved, a small procession of lamps among columns of black. The trail forked and shrank until it was more intention than path. The forest here is the kind that erases, sucks sound and distance until even your own breath sounds like an intrusion. Hendricks counted her steps, marked the symbols when she saw them. The diamond split, the ticks like compass points. On a deadfall, somebody had carved a rough arrow the way people do when they want to be found by whoever they trust, or by whoever they're sure is coming for them. The generator smell hit before the sound, a thin metallic scent of exhaust that had bleeded into needles, then vanished. We killed the last foot of light as the trees thinned to a clearing that wasn't one, just a swale where undergrowth had been beaten down. In the hollow, half covered by brush, a sheet of corrugated metal lay like a misplaced roof. Rivas's head turned once listening. No voices, no hum. He motioned 2 deputies to the flanks and bent to the sheet. The edge was anchored by a chain that came up from soil and disappeared into an eyelet. The chain was new,
The lock had a bright bite to it. Hendricks put a hand to the metal. Even through her gloves she felt it. Not cold, not yet warm, but not the night's temperature either. Recently handled, recently opened. "Let's see it," she said.
They cut the lock with a hydraulic spreader the size of a carry-on and worked the chain free. Together, quietly, they lifted the steel aside. The opening beneath wasn't a hole, but a square throat descending into a utility vault, concrete-walled and dry. A steel ladder ran down the side. The air that wafted up was stale with plastic, adhesive, and the ghost of burnt fuel. Rivas went first with his lamp tucked against his cheekbone. Hendricks followed, counting rungs. Her boots hit smooth concrete. The lamp washed a small room that had no business in the middle of the forest. A bench made from sawhorses and plywood, a plastic folding chair, zip ties in a looped string like Christmas garland, an empty water jug with a crushed side. And there, bolted into a bracket at eye level, was a camera, smaller than the camcorder, one of those motion-activated trail units with infrared eyes. Its SD slot was empty. Its LED winked once like a last irritated thought and went dead. On the workbench lay a hat the color of wet clay, brim flat, band stained darker where sweat would sit. Hendricks didn't need the badge to tell her what it was. Rivas reached for it with gloved hands and turned the brim gently. Inside, someone had written 2 letters in block ink that had bled underwater and dried back into legibility. ND. Noah Delaney, Hendricks said. And this, Rivas murmured, touching a keyring lying beside the hat. 7 keys fanned against one another, stamped with tiny codes. A brass tag hung from the ring. Haynes. They looked at each other in the poor light. Above them, the forest pressed its ear to the hatch. "Either Haynes found this and didn't tell us," Hendricks said, voice level, "or he keeps a place like this and Noah was brought here." Rivas swallowed. "Those are service keys, master set." Hendricks lifted the hat and something slid underneath, a rectangle of plastic taped to the plywood. The tape gave with a tired sound. She peeled it back. A micro SD card the size of a fingernail stuck to her glove. The card had been labeled with a paint marker in a steady hand, Mile 19-0216. Her lamp trembled just enough to make the letters jitter. She looked up at Rivas. 0216, she said. Same minute as the timestamp on the final frame. They climbed out with the card sealed in a vial. The forest took them back the way it had given them in. By the trucks, the hikers waited in the wash of a single dome light, faces pale. Owen Pike stepped forward, hands up like he was approaching a skittish animal. "I was in trails here," he said, before anyone asked. "I know you don't need me, but Noah was good people." "Where do you learn to tie that orange tape?" Hendricks asked. He blinked. "What?" "The way you flagged the find. It's a search grid pattern, not how most hikers mark a trail." Pike looked down. "Habit." Hendricks let it sit. She handed the vial to the tech. She said, "Pull everything we can. Start with the last minute." When the monitor flickered back, the forest bloomed back to life, but this time from a different angle, the fixed view of a hidden camera pointed at a chair in a concrete room. The chair was empty. Timestamp 0214. A shadow moved across the far wall. A figure stepped in. He wore a ranger's hat, brim down, face occluded by the edge of the lamp. He set something on the bench with care, a camcorder. Then he turned to the chair, and when he looked up at the lens, the brim lifted enough to show his eyes. Rivas made a sound like he'd bitten metal. Hendricks felt her pulse punch. The man on the screen was not Paul Haynes. It was Noah Delaney, alive, staring straight into the secret camera 2 minutes before his camcorder went black. And he wasn't alone. Someone else moved into frame behind him, just an arm and a shoulder at first, then a full chest with a torn patch. The figure reached past Noah, took the camcorder, and clicked it off. When the lamp's beam slid, it landed on a set of keys hanging from a hook on the wall, a brass tag glinting as it swung like a metronome. Haynes. The picture cut to black. Outside, a barred owl called once and the sound folded back into the trees. Hendricks didn't move. In the pale pool of the dome light, Owen Pike wasn't looking at the screen. He was watching her. When they finally opened the locked maintenance hatch, she thought, the words unspooling against the thud in her chest, everything changed.
The next morning, fog lay across the Willamette like breath on glass. It rolled between the trunks, soft and white, muting every sound except the crunch of boots on gravel. Detective Laura Hendricks stood beside the open tailgate of her SUV, a paper cup steaming in one hand and the micro SD card sealed in evidence plastic in the other. Across from her, Agent Rivas spoke quietly to a pair of federal techs setting up a forensic tent. They'd been up all night trying to decrypt the data, running it through restoration software designed for crash cams and black boxes. By sunrise, they'd pulled less than half an hour of usable footage, all from the same night Noah Delaney vanished. "Whatever's on that card," Rivas said, approaching her, "it wasn't meant to be found." "Then someone made sure it would be," Hendricks replied. He handed her a folder, preliminary lab notes. "Delaney's prints on the camcorder, yes, but we found partials on the SD slot that don't match him, not Haynes either." "Someone else loaded the card," she said. Rivas nodded, maybe after Delaney disappeared. They exchanged a long look. Both of them knew what that meant, a third presence, someone who'd had access to both men. The footage played inside a dim command trailer parked near the trailhead. The lights were low, the only glow coming from the monitor. Hendricks watched as Noah appeared on screen again, this time sitting on the chair they'd found in the bunker. His face was drawn tight, his uniform streaked with mud. He spoke directly to someone off camera. "You can't just keep this. You said it was for the study. You said we were tracking movement." A second voice answered, calm, older, male, steady. "We are tracking it, but now it's tracking us." Noah's hand trembled. "This isn't research anymore." The frame shook slightly as if the person filming adjusted their grip. A faint scraping noise echoed in the background, metal on metal. Rivas leaned forward. "Pause there." The tech froze the frame. On the back wall, barely visible behind Noah's shoulder, hung a series of laminated maps. Hendricks squinted. The outlines were topographical, red pins punched along a river bend. "Those pins line up with service markers. Except those are closed trails, areas restricted since the landslide 2 years ago." Hendricks pointed to one particular spot marked in black. "That's where we found the camcorder." Rivas exhaled. "Then whoever's behind this used the restricted zone for something. The generator, the vault, maybe more." 2 hours later, they drove north following a faded maintenance road until the gravel gave out. Hendricks took point, scanning for any sign of recent movement. Tire ruts, disturbed soil, prints. The forest was quiet in that watchful way that felt unnatural. She stopped beside a cluster of trees scarred with the same carved symbols, the split diamond and the 4 ticks. But this time fresh black ink outlined the grooves. "Marker's been redrawn," she said softly. Rivas ran a gloved thumb along one, ink still tacky. Whoever did this was here recently. Maybe this morning. They followed the carvings for half a mile until the forest opened into a shallow ravine. The air carried a faint hum, low, mechanical. Hendricks crouched and motioned for silence. Beneath the hum came another sound, faint, rhythmic tapping. They crept forward until the trees fell away to a clearing littered with old ranger signs, half buried under moss. A truck sat in the center, forest green, unmarked, engine idling. "Federal plates," Rivas whispered. "No signal out here. If that's one of ours, it's not supposed to be." The tapping came again, from the truck's bed. Hendricks drew her sidearm, signaling to Rivas. They split around the vehicle, each taking a side. On her count, she gripped the latch and yanked it open. Inside, under a tarp, lay rows of sealed plastic bins, each labeled with date codes. The most recent read 0624 Field Sample Audio. Rivas flipped one open. Inside was a handheld recorder, the kind rangers use for wildlife logs. He pressed play. Static. Then voices, distorted, distant. Noah's voice came through first. "They're burying them, not deep. I can still smell the gas." Then another voice, lower, commanding. "Keep filming. No one will believe you unless they see it." The tape cut off. Hendricks stared at the bin. How many recordings? Dozens. She swallowed. "We need a warrant and a secure chain of custody. This is bigger than one missing ranger." Rivas nodded grimly. "We're sitting on an internal operation, someone high up." By dusk, the site swarmed with federal vehicles. Evidence techs sealed the bins, officers cordoned off the area, and a drone swept overhead for heat signatures. Hendricks stood apart, flipping through Noah's recovered field journal. The last page had a smudge of dirt and a single line written in a hurry. "If you find this, don't trust the uniforms." Her stomach dropped. "Laura," Rivas called from the other side of the clearing. He held up his phone. "I just got a message from dispatch. Paul Haynes turned himself in." Her head snapped up. "What?" "He walked into the Eugene substation an hour ago. Says he has information on Delaney." "Alive?" Rivas's expression was unreadable. "They're not sure." At the substation, Haynes sat handcuffed to a table, hair matted, uniform streaked with dirt. His eyes were glassy but sharp with fear. Hendricks entered slowly, Rivas behind her. "You've been busy," she said, placing the folder on the table. "Vault in the woods? Recordings? You want to tell me why?" Haynes looked at her, throat bobbing. "You don't understand. They were watching him, watching us. It was supposed to be a wildlife study. Then they started digging. Digging for what?" He shook his head. "They called it containment. Said there were chemical dumps buried from the 60s, unmarked. Noah found barrels along the South Ridge. He wanted to go public." "So you stopped him?" "I tried to. They were already following him. I told him to hide the footage until I could get help." "Who's they, Paul?" Rivas asked. He leaned forward, voice cracking. "You don't get it. I found his car 2 days later. Keys still inside. When I went back to report, my supervisor told me to drop it. Said Delaney was a liability." "Who's your supervisor?" Hendricks pressed. He hesitated. "Deputy Regional Chief Everett Cole." Rivas swore under his breath. Cole was the service's public face. Press conferences, budget hearings, the man who smiled for cameras while wildfires burned. Hendricks' eyes darted to the mirror. "You don't have long. He knows that tape's out." The lights flickered. A faint pop came from the corridor. Hendricks turned. The building had gone silent. 1 moment later, the emergency lights kicked in, flooding the room in red. Rivas grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we lost power. Confirm backup." A gunshot cracked somewhere down the hall. Hendricks froze, instincts flaring. "Stay here," she ordered Haynes, then drew her weapon. Rivas followed her into the hall. They moved past the reception desk, empty. Another shot echoed, this time closer, followed by a short scream. When they reached the holding corridor, the door to the generator room stood open. A shadow moved inside. Hendricks aimed low, voice steady. "Police! Drop it!" The figure turned, flashlight slicing across his face. A deputy, badge gleaming, but the look in his eyes wasn't relief. It was cold. He lifted his weapon. Rivas fired first. The man dropped, gun skittering across the floor. Hendricks rushed forward, checking the badge. Regional Service Division, name tag Cole. Her mind raced. Cole was in Eugene? Rivas crouched beside the body, breathing hard. He must have known Haynes came in, or followed him here. In the interrogation room behind them, a metallic sound echoed, chains dragging, chairs scraping. Hendricks spun and ran back. The room was empty. The cuffs hung from the table, snapped clean. Haynes was gone. On the table, he'd left the ranger's hat, Noah's hat, with a folded note tucked beneath the brim. Hendricks unfolded it. 3 words, written in shaky pencil. Check mile 19. She looked up at Rivas, adrenaline burning through exhaustion. "He's going back," she said. Rivas nodded grimly. "Then so are we." Outside, sirens wailed through the fog, echoing like ghosts between the trees. And in the far distance, faint but unmistakable, came the low hum of a generator starting up again.
The convoy crawled through the dark like a vein of light threading the forest. Engines low, headlights hooded. Detective Laura Hendricks leaned forward in the passenger seat, eyes cutting through the windshield's wash of fog. Agent Rivas drove, one hand gripping the wheel tight enough to whiten the knuckles. They hadn't spoken much since Eugene, Haynes' escape, Cole's body, the blood on the substation floor. All of it had pulled the case out of local jurisdiction and into something that smelled like corruption layered in camouflage. Now they were going back to where it started, mile 19. "Dispatch has us on limited comms," Rivas said. "Signal dies past the ridge." "Then we're on our own," Hendricks replied. The forest grew denser as the road narrowed. The air carried a wet chill, heavy with cedar and exhaust. Ahead, a faint orange glow shimmered between the trees, the generator site. Rivas slowed to a crawl. "That's our light." Hendricks chambered her weapon and stepped out first. The mud sucked at her boots. Every sound felt magnified. The whisper of rain on leaves, the hum of distant power. She motioned for Rivas to flank left while she took the slope down. At the base of the clearing, the generator sat half buried in mud, its casing dented and streaked with rust. It was running, but no one was there to operate it. Cables led into the open hatch they'd found the night before, the one leading down into the concrete vault. She crouched beside it, fingers brushing the metal. Warm, recently touched. Rivas joined her, scanning the tree line. No tracks but ours. Then he's already below. They descended into the hatch. The air inside was heavier this time, humid, metallic, faintly chemical. The small bunker looked different too. The bench had been cleared, the bins of evidence gone. Only the chair remained, facing the camera bracket on the wall. A red light blinked faintly, recording. Rivas switched it off and scanned the room. Someone wiped this place clean. Hendricks' lamp passed over the floor and stopped. A boot print, fresh, sharp-edged, still damp. The tread matched service issue. She looked at Rivas. Haynes. A metallic clang echoed from deeper inside the concrete corridor. Both turned toward it, a passage they hadn't noticed before. Steel, sealed from the outside with a sliding bolt. Scratches lined the metal, long and uneven, as if someone had clawed to get out. She slid the bolt free. The hinges groaned. Inside, the beam found what looked like an improvised lab. Tables with gas canisters, soil samples, sealed jars marked with coordinates. On the far wall hung a large map of Willamette National Forest, peppered with colored pins and overlapping circles. One circle was drawn in thick red ink, mile 19. At the center of the room sat a single open case. Inside, a row of cassette tapes labeled by date, June 2018 through August 2018. Each marked Monitor Log. Rivas exhaled. What the hell were they monitoring? Hendricks picked up the top tape and squinted. The label read Del 001. She slid it into a dusty recorder nearby and pressed play. A hiss, then a voice. Noah Delaney. They told me to log soil activity, but I know what I found. There are bones in those barrels. Animal, maybe human. They buried more near the stream bed. Cole says it's a containment zone, that it's classified, but the markings don't match any service protocol. I think it's dumping. Chemical, biological, something old. A pause. Then his tone shifted, urgent, close to panic. If anything happens to me, Haynes knows where the tapes are. He said the service did this before. He said he's seen what happens to people who talk. Rivas's jaw tightened. They used him. Then they buried him. Hendricks pressed stop. Not yet. She rewound, catching the faintest sound in the background. Footsteps, voices, then a name. Owen, help me with this barrel. Rivas froze. Owen Pike? The hiker.
Hendricks said. "He worked here 5 years ago." He wasn't a bystander. He was part of it. Before they could move, another sound rippled through the corridor. A slow creak above, followed by the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel. Hendricks killed her light. Someone's back. They climbed quietly toward the hatch. Through the narrow slit of the opening, a silhouette crossed the clearing. Male, wearing a ranger's jacket, rifle slung low. Rivas whispered, "That's Haynes." Hendricks steadied her breath. "No. Look closer." The figure turned toward the generator, headlamp flickering across his face. It wasn't Haynes. It was Owen Pike. He moved methodically, opening each bin in the truck they'd left taped off, pulling out drives, flashcards, notebooks, burning them in a steel drum beside the generator. Smoke rose, acrid and black. "Evidence cleanup. Or cover-up," Hendricks said. She motioned for him to circle right while she came up behind Pike. The mud betrayed them first, a single crack of a twig. Pike spun, rifle raising, eyes wide and feral. "Drop it," Hendricks shouted. He didn't. He fired. The shot went wild, biting bark beside her. She dove behind a log, returned fire. The generator stuttered, sputtered out, plunging everything into near dark. Rivas came around from the flank, flashlight beam cutting through smoke. Pike turned toward it, firing again. Rivas dropped to a knee, fired twice. Pike staggered, rifle falling. The forest went still again. Hendricks rose cautiously. Pike lay on his side, gasping, mud streaked up his arm. In his hand, something small and silver, a flash drive, clenched tight. She knelt beside him. "Why, Owen? Why bury it all?" He coughed, blood flecking his lip. "You think it was about the dumping?" His eyes rolled toward the dark tree line. "It wasn't chemicals. What was it?" His breath hitched. "Field test. Of them." "What field test?" He tried to speak again, but the air left him. His hand fell open. The flash drive slid into the mud. Rivas picked it up carefully. The label read, "Project Verdant." Hendricks looked at him. "That's not a service designation." He shook his head slowly. "No, that's Department of Defense." Hours later, floodlights washed the clearing. Federal agents combed the site while crime scene techs cataloged everything. Haynes was found in the woods nearby, unconscious, sedated. He claimed Pike had tracked him down after the interrogation and forced him back to the site. But the flash drive, the only thing Pike hadn't managed to burn, was intact. Hendricks watched from the hood of her SUV as Rivas inserted it into the forensic laptop. The screen came alive with encrypted folders. One read, "Field Test, Classified, Subject ND." They exchanged a long look before opening it. A single video file appeared. Experiment 6-24.mov. Rivas double-clicked.
The footage was clearer than the camcorder. A medical-style room. Noah Delaney sat strapped to a chair, IV line in his arms, eyes open but unfocused. Voices spoke off camera. Clinical. Detached. Subject exposure complete. Record behavioral response. Noah whispered something, barely audible. Hendricks leaned closer. Enhance. The tech boosted the gain. Noah's voice came through, soft, broken. Please, tell Haynes it's already in the water. The camera tilted as someone stepped into frame. A man in a suit. No uniform, no badge. He adjusted his gloves, looked into the lens, and said, "Terminate recording." Then the screen cut to black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the low hum of generators filled the air again. Rivas finally broke the silence. They used him as a test subject. Whatever they were dumping, it wasn't waste. It was research. Hendricks's voice was steady, but low. And they made it look like a missing Ranger case. Which means Cole wasn't the top. Someone else authorized this. Hendricks watched the trees sway under the night wind.
Whoever it was, he's still out there. Rivas unplugged the flash drive and sealed it in evidence plastic. We take this straight to the bureau. But as Hendricks turned back toward the trucks, she noticed something glinting near the mud line where Pike had fallen. A phone, half buried, screen cracked. She picked it up. The device buzzed once, weak battery flickering. A message notification blinked on the lock screen. From unknown. Delete everything, mile 21. Her eyes met Rivas's. He exhaled. There's another sight. She slipped the phone into evidence bag, her pulse steady but hard. Then the forest isn't done yet. The next morning, a public statement went out. Case closed. Missing ranger incident linked internal misconduct. No foul play suspected. But the locals in Willamette said otherwise. They said helicopters came at night that week, that trucks rolled out of the forest with no markings and engines too quiet to be commercial. And weeks later, hikers near mile 21 reported something strange. The sound of generators deep in the trees, running when no one was there to fuel them.
If you thought this one was wild, wait for the next. Hit subscribe before the forest erases the rest.